Undercover cop faces the death penalty, but her German Shepherd's final act turns the nation upside down. The federal courtroom was sealed tighter than any national security vault. No cameras, no press, no leaks. Only the judge, the jury, the prosecution, the defense, and a handful of government officials were allowed within the heavy steel doors. The air was stifling with silence. The only sound was the turning of pages and the faint echo of boots on polished floors. At the center of it all sat Lana Brooks, former undercover officer with the Department of Justice. Her face was unreadable, her posture tense but composed. Dressed in a plain gray jumpsuit, she looked nothing like the woman who had once taken down international weapons cartels from within. For 4 years, she had infiltrated the most violent arms trafficking syndicates in the Western Hemisphere. Now, she was labeled a traitor. The charges against her were grave espionage, murder, theft of classified weapons access codes. According to federal investigators, Lana had orchestrated the death of her commanding officer and 2 intelligence operatives during a botched extraction mission. Surveillance footage placed her at the scene. Her fingerprints were on the stolen data drive. A confidential informant claimed she had met with foreign buyers weeks before the The evidence was airtight. Too airtight. Lana's court-appointed attorney sat stiffly beside her, barely able to speak more than what was strictly permitted. He had filed motions for additional discovery, motions to present evidence that had mysteriously vanished from the DOJ's internal database. All had been denied. Witnesses had refused to testify. A gag order was placed on the entire case. The walls were closing in. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, cleared her throat and looked down at the sentencing document. This court, having reviewed all presented evidence and testimony, is prepared to issue a verdict in the case of United States versus Lana Brooks. Then a noise, a metallic clatter echoed outside the chamber. The bafe turned. Before anyone could react, the double door slammed open with a crash. A large graying German Shepherd burst into the room, growling low, eyes locked forward. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The dog stopped halfway to the defense table, then turned suddenly, his gaze narrowing on someone seated at the back of the chamber. It was the Secretary of Defense. The dog let out a sharp, commanding bark, then another. Its posture stiffened, ears pinned back, eyes unwavering. "Who let that animal in here?" the judge barked. But no one moved. The room had frozen. Lana turned slowly, recognition flickering in her. "His shadow," she whispered. The Secretary of Defense shifted, uncomfortably, visibly rattled under the dog's glare. For a moment, the powerful man's composure cracked. His fingers tightened on the armrest, his jaw clenched. Shadow barked again, louder. This time, the courtroom remained in stunned silence. Someone somewhere in that room had just been exposed, and the dog knew it. Lana's eyes never left Shadow's, and Shadow never stopped watching the man behind the lie. 3 years before the trial, Shadow had been declared unfit for service. He had once belonged to the elite Delta K-9 unit, trained for black operations no government would ever admit existed. Shadow had led extraction raids, bomb recon missions, and stealth security sweeps in hostile territory. He was unmatched until the ambush in Kabul. Shrapnel blast cracked his skull, rupturing part of his auditory cortex. The veterinary report was final. Partial neural damage, post-traumatic stress disorder, and complete vocal paralysis. He could no longer bark, respond to verbal commands, or even follow hand signals consistently. He was considered useless, but not to Lana. She had visited the recovery compound to interview a handler for an unrelated case. That was when she found him lying silently in a dark kennel, half his face scarred, his once deliberate eyes dull with defeat. Others passed him by, treating him as a retired asset. Broken tool huddled by the cage. No one screamed at her, but Lana stopped. He crouched down beside his cage and whispered, "You don't have to prove anything to anyone anymore." Shadow slowly looked up, their eyes locked. Something clicked. She filed a request to adopt him. It was denied. So she went higher, then higher still. When that failed, she bypassed protocol entirely, forged her own signature, and walked out of the facility with him. Cost her 2-month suspension, a formal warning on her record, and the respect of half her department. She did not care. Shadow was not a weapon. He was a soldier left behind. She had been left behind once, too. The first months were slow. He would not eat near people. He startled at every metallic noise. He never barked, not once. Lana moved his bed into her living room and simply stayed with him. Sometimes she spoke, sometimes she did not. But Shadow never left her side. Then came the missions. As an undercover agent inside a global arms-dealing ring, Lana was required to take only the most discreet allies. Shadow became her shadow. He moved without leash or command, understanding the rhythm of her breathing better than any spoken word. He could not follow orders, but he could sense lies. During a covert meet in Prague, Lana sat down with an informant whose intel was the key to breaking a smuggling route through Ukraine. The man seemed nervous, but believable. Shadow lay silently at her feet. Then his ears twitched. He stood up and turned toward the wall, not toward the man, and walked slowly toward the far end of the room. There, hidden beneath the radiator, he began to paw gently at the baseboard. Lana's heart quickened. Behind the panel, they found a microtransmitter, still active, still sending. The room had been bugged before she arrived. When the man saw this, he bolted. Shadow lunged, pinning him. Without a sound, the operation revealed the first real traitor, a top-tier intelligence officer who had fed weapons codes to international buyers. If Shadow had not moved, if he had not sensed the transmission no scanner could detect, the leak would have gone unnoticed. That night, as Lana patched a small scratch on his paw, she leaned in and whispered, "If one day I disappear, you remember this? Remember who the real enemy is." Shadow blinked slowly, then rested his scarred head on her knee. He never barked again, but he never forgot. The mission was classified. Level Omega. Untraceable, unacknowledged, and irreversible. Lana Brooks knew it could be her last. The directive was simple. Investigate the suspected leak of quantum-controlled weapons from a secured United States military facility. The evidence pointed to something far deeper than any foreign threat. Whispers inside classified networks named the source Argus. The code name stood for Advanced Reconnaissance Group 4. Unrestricted systems, a supposed shadow. Cell embedded inside the intelligence. Infrastructure itself. Nobody had seen a base. Nobody knew where it began, only that each lead ended in silence or death. Lana had one clue. Damien Voss, a venture capitalist with an AI tech firm, contracted for defense interface upgrades. His system specialized in biometric control layers for automated weapon systems. Everything from drones to satellite uplinks. Officially, he was a patriot. Unofficially, he had met with 3 individuals known to have ties to black market arms networks. Lana embedded herself as a security consultant under a false identity. Shadow was not with her. The mission was too deep, too unpredictable. She had left him behind reluctantly just for a few weeks. She thought she would finish this one last job and then they could disappear together clean. Then the system breach happened. It was 247 AIMM when the central server at Vastec logged a forced entry. 62 terabytes of encrypted weapons control architecture were downloaded and rerouted to an external satellite. The video log showed the breach in perfect clarity. Lana Brooks in uniform walking calmly into the server room, entering her passcode, and placing a drive into the system. There was just one problem. Lana had never been there. The real Lana was 900 m away, meeting with a Department of Energy contact at a classified secure site. The technology used against her was something she had only heard rumors of. Biological deep-fake overlay. Synthetic masks created with microscopic precision, mimicking the heat, heartbeat, and facial expressions of real people in real time. They were untraceable, uncatchable, and someone had used one to frame her. She was arrested the next morning. No trial, no explanation. Her name was wiped from mission records. Her attorney's access was restricted. Even her classified clearance was retroactively rescinded. Shadow was taken as evidence. Labeled under non-functional equipment, and transferred to a remote property room inside the DC Evidence Logistics Center. And there in that fluorescent lit basement, surrounded by forgotten rifles and broken hard drives, Shadow waited. The first week he did not move. The second week he stopped eating. The third he started growling every time a certain officer came near. The same high-ranking military official who had authorized Lana's arrest. Brigadier General Holden Krell. The guards dismissed it at first. Oh, war dog. Trauma, they muttered. But Shadow did not stop. Every time Krell passed through the corridor for an unrelated inspection, Shadow stood up, silent, and stared with eyes like cold steel. One time, he bared his teeth. One afternoon, a young evidence tech named Miles Carter noticed something odd. Shadow, usually motionless, had dragged his blanket across the room, wedged it under a corner of a large gray steel crate, and laid down on top of it, refusing to move. 4 hours. The crate had no barcode, no label, no intake sheet. Curious, Miles used a manual override key and slowly opened the latch. Inside, beneath layers of misfile paperwork and decommissioned radio parts, he found a rugged external hard drive, partially broken but intact. He powered it up. The first file was corrupted. The second showed a video feed from a low-angle surveillance drone. In the server room at Vostek. Unregistered camera placed in the ceiling beam for motion heat. Calibration. In the grainy image, a woman who looked like Lana walked into the room, but the biometric tag reader showed no signature match. Moments later, a second figure entered, face obscured, gloved hands, holding a remote. Signal jammer and biometric override tool. The date stamp matched the night of the breach. Miles felt the hairs on the back of his neck rise. He played the footage again and then he called internal audit. Within 12 minutes, the Federal Cyber Division had the hard drive sealed and the crate labeled. Special Security Directive 9.4. They tried to sedate Shadow for transport. He refused to move until they carried the crate out first. It was then that Miles looked down and whispered to the old German shepherd, "You found it, didn't you? You never stopped watching." Cadow stared back, silent, but his message had already been heard. Thomas Reed had never believed the official story. He had served beside Lana Brooks for 6 years through blood, dust, and fire. She was loyal, calculated, a protector by nature, not a traitor. The footage that damned her had never sat right with him, and when he learned what had happened to Shadow, isolated, restrained, nearly euthanized, his doubts solidified into something else. Fury. So when he received the anonymous tip, surveillance footage, recovered by a junior technician from an unregistered drive deep in the evidence locker, he acted. That night, Thomas quietly accessed the digital archive through an old login he never deactivated. The video shook him to his core. Showed the real team leader of Operation Sentinel, Colonel Dwayne Mercer, being ambushed in a classified hangar bay. The killer was not Lana. It was Brigadier General Halden Krell, the same man who had orchestrated Lana's arrest. The same man who now sat on the High Defense Council, overseeing her secret military tribunal. On the video, Krell executed Mercer with a suppressed firearm and then wiped the scene clean using a biometric mask kit and signal disruptor. Then he walked away calm as ice. Thomas knew what this meant. Lana had been framed to eliminate the last witness to an internal conspiracy involving Argus. And if they succeeded, she would die to protect it. There was no time for legal procedures or appeal requests. The tribunal was already underway in a sealed underground courtroom built beneath Arlington compound. Only high-level officials, a judge with top clearance, and Lana herself were present. No cameras, no press, no time. Thomas needed a way in. He went to the one ally he knew would never stop fighting, Shadow. They had retired the old German shepherd to a medical containment unit under observation, claiming neurological instability. But when Thomas arrived, Shadow stood on all fours as if he had been waiting. There was no hesitation in the dog's movements as they moved together across the compound perimeter. Under moonlight, no growl, no bark, just a silent urgency. Thomas wore no body armor, carried no weapon, only a military ID badge and the encrypted hard drive clutched under his arm. As they reached the access gate to the underground wing, a pair of military police blocked their way. Orders had already gone out. No disruptions, no visitors. Shadow moved first. He lunged, not to harm, but to intercept, his body colliding into one officer's knees. knocking him aside. Before the second could react, Thomas was through the gate, sprinting toward the stairwell. Alarms blared and the hallway lights dimmed to red. Inside the courtroom, the judge's hand hovered above the sentencing document. Final confirmation. Defendant Lana Brooks charged with treason, murder of a superior officer, and high code data theft. Under Military Code Article 147, the sentence is the doors burst open. Stop the sentence. Thomas's voice thundered down the chamber like a hammer cracking stone. All heads turn. Shadow barreled through the aisle, his coat glistening under the cold light, eyes locked on the one man seated furthest from the front. General Halden Krell. Shadow stopped right in front of him. Then he growled deep, low, unrelenting. Krell tried to rise from his seat to feign confusion, but his face had already begun to pale. Thomas reached the center of the room, panting, holding up the drive. This is surveillance from the Delta 17 server bay. It shows who really killed Colonel Mercer and who used biometric masking to frame Lana Brooks. The courtroom fell into stunned silence. The judge motioned for the screen to activate. The clip began to play. Gasps echoed. A woman in uniform dropped her pen. Another covered her mouth. On screen, Krell's face appeared in the corner reflection, clear as day, before he drew the pistol and fired at Mercer. Lana sat motionless in her chair, head bowed. Then slowly, her shoulders began to shake. Tears fell soundlessly down her cheeks. Shadow turned to her, took 3 steps, and sat beside her, not barking, not growling, just watching, waiting until justice finally came. The verdict had been reversed within the hour. All charges against Lana Brooks were dropped. The tribunal's records were unsealed and a full-scale investigation into General Halden Krell and his network within Argus was launched. The truth buried for too long beneath layers of classified deception had finally clawed its way to the surface, carried not by courtroom arguments, but by a loyal German shepherd who had never spoken a word. Shadow. After the courtroom chaos subsided, Lana rushed to the military hospital where Shadow had been taken. The medical team had done their best, but the violent impact from when Shadow had thrown himself against the guards, compounded by a spinal injury sustained years earlier in a battlefield explosion, had aggravated a hidden lesion. Now he lay motionless beneath soft lights, his breathing shallow, a light bandage covering the old scar that had never quite healed. Lana knelt beside him, whispering his name. Shadow. It's me. I am home. One ear flicked. Barely. She smiled through the tears as she placed her hand gently over his chest. The rhythm beneath it was faint, but steady, like a heartbeat echoing from a memory neither of them wanted to forget. You brought the truth, boy, she whispered, brushing her hand through the graying fur behind his neck. That was all I ever needed. A low exhale left his snout. His eyes did not open, but his breathing stilled into something peaceful. A moment later, it stopped. Lana remained at his side long after the monitors went quiet. Weeks passed and in the courtyard of the Federal Justice Complex in Washington, D.C., beneath a quiet patch of sky, the nation remembered a hero not for his words but for his silence. A bronze statue was erected, life-size, resolute. Depicted a German shepherd seated beside A folded American flag. Ears perked. Gaze fixed forward as if he were still, guarding something unseen. No medals, no ribbons, just a small engraving at the base, simple and unadorned. Shadow, the dog who unmasked power. Visitors often stopped. Some would linger, a few would cry, but every so often a fellow soldier would walk by and pause, then raise a hand in silent salute. And Shadow, the dog who once walked through shadows to bring truth into the light, stood forever watching. If this story moved your heart, you are not alone. Shadow was not just a dog. He was loyalty in its purest form. A silent warrior who stood for truth when no one else dared to speak. In a world clouded by power and lies, it took one faithful German shepherd to remind us that courage does not need a voice. It just needs a heart that refuses to give up. If you believe, stories like Shadows deserve to be remembered, honored, and shared. Make sure to subscribe to Amazing Paws Stories, hit the like button, share this video with someone who needs hope today, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a tale of loyalty, bravery, and the incredible bond between humans and their four-legged heroes. Because sometimes the truest acts of heroism come on four paws. Thank you for watching.